Hi everyone, good morning, evening, or afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Maloka and I'm based out of Cape Town, South Africa. I'm very glad to kickstart today's session from the recruiter's perspective of international employment truths in the sciences. I am an associate from Stratum International. Stratum is a board and executive search firm, and we specialize in the mining industry. And essentially, we assist majors, mid-tiers, and junior mining companies identify leaders across the corporate and site-based roles. Our footprint is global, and we have a head office in London and offices here in Cape Town, where I am based. And approximately 50% of our clientele have mining assets in Africa. So today I thought it would be great to speak to you about accessing international opportunity as a geoscientist in the mineral sector. And because 50% of our clientele's assets are in Africa, I thought it would be best to share insights into work opportunity from a headquarter role level or a site-based role level. By the end of this webinar, I hope that you'll walk away with really valuable insights that can help you navigate your international career path. So as you all may know, or don't know if you don't, the mineral sector is on an upward trajectory. If you look at the numbers last year, the global mineral market was valued at 1.09 trillion US dollars. By this year, 2025, it's projected to reach 1.16 trillion US dollars, growing at a 6.2% annual rate. So what does this mean for you as a geoscience professional? This means that there's more opportunity. Multinational companies are aggressively recruiting geoscience professionals to grow with this rapid demand of the mineral sector. However, this also means that there's a higher competition in the talent pool. The best jobs will probably go to those with the global experience and the advanced skill set. So your international mobility will be key. Multinationals need professionals who are able to adapt at different regions. And if we look at the talent landscape in the mineral sector, I've listed several disciplines where geosciences professionals can advance in or they want to develop in within the mineral sector. And whether you are deep in exploration or optimizing mine planning or focusing on environmental impact, there's definitely a place for you in the global market. But securing these roles will often require international mobility and understanding the realities of the international job market. So then what are some of these international realities and what are the benefits and challenges of these? So if we look at the headquarters versus site-based role opportunities and challenges, you'd find that headquarter roles, which are often in corporate offices in major cities, focus on strategic planning. You can witness or be involved in the direct impact on business direction. You may have steadier work-life balance, standard office hours with planned travel. But the challenges here would probably be less hands-on experience. You may feel disconnected from the operational side of mining, and your career progression may be dependent on the corporate structures rather than direct results from performing on site. And then when you look at site-based roles, you would probably find that you have more responsibility early on. You're exposed to a lot, and you often may lead to faster promotions. You have hands-on impact because you have direct involvement in aspects like discoveries, mine planning, and problem solving. And sometimes you may even get higher compensation looking at your base salary and then compounding that with hardship allowances and bonuses for working in remote locations. And site-based roles also offer a really adventurous lifestyle. You get the opportunity to travel to unique locations and experience different cultures. The challenges, however, as you may know, are harsher working conditions. So you'd be exposed to extreme weather, long shifts, and physically demanding tasks. And then the work-life balance as well is something to consider. Fly-in, fly-out schedules can mean longer periods away from your family. And there's also the aspect of geopolitical factors. When you're working, you may find that some sites are based in really geopolitical volatile jurisdictions, and you need to assess the risks and considerations of working in such locations. So whatever you choose, if you prefer strategic roles, stability, you may prefer HQ role. If you prefer site-based work, if you want field challenges and rapid career progression. I found that many geoscience professionals usually transition between both of their careers, and a blend of site and HQ experience does make you highly competitive in the global mining market. And then another key consideration is cultural and lifestyle awareness. So when you're working internationally, especially at a site-based level, there are diverse cultures and cross-cultural communication nuances we have to be aware of. And some of the geosciences professionals I've engaged with really emphasize having a consultative and collaborative working style. And then in terms of the lifestyle considerations, looking at fly-in, fly-out schedules, these can definitely affect your work-life balance and your family units. Then you also have the aspects of tax implications that vary by country. Know the financial impact before you consider relocation or earning internationally. For example, I had a candidate who was working on site in Africa, but he was Australian. And as an Australian, he was still taxed in Australia based on this international outcome. So it's really important for you to understand what these considerations are when you're working internationally. Then you have the immigration process aspect. The key takeaway here is do your research. Help recruiters and future employers help you. If there's a specific region you're seeking opportunity in, do in-depth research of what you require in terms of visa requirements and work permits. I've seen so many situations where in international hiring processes, a candidate is really interested in the job opportunity, as well as the region of where the opportunity is. However, they've done little to no research on the visa and work permit requirements to successfully work in this region, leaving the future employer and recruiters having to do most of the work, which can limit the progression of your candidacy. Now, future-proofing your skill sets. How do you then design a sustainable career built for international work opportunities? The first would be defining your career path. Easier said than done, but try to set clear short-term and long-term career goals to navigate the dynamic geoscience industry. Ask yourself questions like, do you want to work in the field or at HQ level, or do you want to transition between both? I've often seen that in earlier career stages of geosciences, people often start in the field, and then as they mature, they really progress to your strategic corporate-based roles. Ask yourself, are you aiming for technical mastery, or are you aiming to sit at a leadership role? And also ask what regions or commodities really do interest you. By having a clear vision, you can definitely make intentional career moves and upskill in the right areas. And then there's also the aspect of technological advancements in the industry. As you know, technology is really redefining our world, and it's redefining the geoscience space, from AI-driven mineral exploration to remote sensing and automation. Those who embrace these advancements will really have a significant career edge. Keep up with these trends, they will make you indispensable. And then another one that I've also found in future-proofing your skill sets in the geosciences is really having a multilingual advantage. As a candidate, being multilingual can enhance your global mobility and attractiveness. Mining is a global industry, and multilingual professionals are often really sought after. Being bilingual can help you in negotiations, especially at a site-based level, can help with team building, team management, and local stakeholder engagement. So I would urge you to invest in language skills that can set you apart and expand your career opportunities in the regions you are seeking opportunities in. And now accessing these international opportunities. So the first thing I would start with is your professional brand, and that's looking at your going from your professional accreditation, your soft skills refinement, and are you an interesting person? When you look at professional accreditation, earning industry recognized certifications, as you may know, can enhance your credibility, and many multinational employees prioritize these accredited professionals for leadership roles and international projects. And then when you look at soft skills refinement, technical skills can definitely get you the job, but soft skills definitely advance your career. Strong communication, adaptability, and leadership are essential. And I often find that the best geoscientists are also effective storytellers. They can explain their findings to executives and local stakeholders. And then, are you an interesting person? Employers are really looking for passionate people who also like to engage in projects, side projects, field research, or science communication. They want people who can bring fresh perspectives, solve problems, and inspire teams. Having a unique professional angle can definitely make future employers and recruiters remember you. Your CV, another very key consideration when you are trying to access international employment. So tailor your CV for every opportunity. I know some people may have long careers, or some people may have mid-tier careers or early careers. But tailoring your CV to the opportunity can definitely help you in accessing these opportunities. First of all, we're starting with your executive summary. Have an executive summary at the start of your CV that really explains your professional career, your strengths, why you're interested in the opportunity, and even some of the regions you've worked in, you seek to work in, and the commodities you have experience in. Keep it clear and concise. Avoid long paragraphs. Use bullet points and highlight these key achievements. And also quantify your impact. So when you're listing your responsibilities under each role you have worked in, equally showcase your measurable results. So for example, you led a drilling campaign that increased resource estimates by 20%. So you can demonstrate how you've created value in this role to the employer. And lastly, and most importantly, leverage recruitment firms like ourselves. Recruitment firms can definitely be a game changer in your international job search. They have access to opportunities that aren't always advertised, and they can guide you through the complexities of.
Оставь, положи телефон.
Oh, sorry. Somebody's mic is on.
It's okay, I've muted it.
Thank you. So as I was saying, leverage recruitment firms, we have access to international opportunities that sometimes often aren't advertised. So we can really operate as your career allies. When you approach recruiters, be clear about your career goals, your preferred locations, and your expected and current salaries. And then now you've secured an interview, you're in the interview process. Often the mistakes I find with highly technical professionals is that they focus heavily on delivering technical facts, but forget that interviews are more than just the knowledge you know. If a candidate struggles to engage in conversation, hiring managers may question their ability to work within a team, present findings, or communicate with stakeholders. And how to improve this is you need to really balance that communication of your technical and soft skills. While your expertise is very important, interviewers also want to see how well you explain and simplify concepts, solve problems, and engage with others. So practice clear, concise responses and show your personality and adaptability. Be approachable and demonstrate that you can really collaborate with different stakeholders on a different level. A great interview isn't just about technical expertise, it's about how well you communicate and engage and prepare for the realities of the role. By addressing these challenges, you can not only improve your chances of landing this dream international job, but it's also right so it can ensure the right fit for you in the long run. And sort of my final takeaway is that you really need to position yourself strategically when you're trying to access these international opportunities. Build a strong personal brand for yourself, refine your CV for each opportunity, and leverage recruitment firms to actually access these global roles. There's a steady future for geoscientists in the mining and mineral sector, only if you take charge of your future and stay ahead of the curve. That's it from my side. I do know we have segments for Q&A in the chat. So if there's anything you'd like to ask, you can definitely put that in the chat. You can also connect with me and Stratum International on LinkedIn. And if you are at any international conferences such as EDU, Mining Daba next year, PDAC next year, please do come and say hi, or you can also reach out via LinkedIn. Thank you very much.
My name is Lindsey Schultz, and I'm the CEO of MRC Recruiting. We are a boutique recruitment firm focused primarily in the Americas, and so a little bit different than Palesa's side of the globe. But we focus really on junior through mid-tier operating companies as a focal point in all functional areas within mining and extractive resources. We also work with consulting groups, mining technology, and consultancies, as well as financial and due diligence companies to support them from their needs. So today I am going to focus somewhat on the same areas as Palesa has focused, but really talking about the US, Canada, and Latin America, and the opportunities that lie in geosciences. So kicking that off, there has been a rising global demand, as I'm sure all of you are aware of, in a variety of areas for critical minerals, And that is driving huge growth in geosciences in the areas that we focus on. So the IEA has sort of prescribed that we can expect growth between 20 and 40% in lithium, cobalt, graphite, even copper is on that list. And so we're really looking at a significant chunk of opportunities here in the US, Canada, and Latin America within all of these areas. And we've certainly seen that growth with our clientele. So lots of opportunities for geoscientists to become involved in a variety of areas. In some of those areas, to name a few here, we've got energy resources, mineral, environmental, academic, and engineering and geology. So really from the very early onset, exploration geology, looking for what we just talked about, all the way through an academic application, as well as environmental. There's huge opportunities for geoscientists to say, hey, I'd like to be involved. And so it's not just from a mining perspective necessarily, but getting, geoscientists in energy and other exploration or academic fields has been areas that we've seen really explosive growth in here recently. And so expanding those job opportunities, at least in the US and Canada, some statistics that I found quite interesting is that in the US, we're expecting roughly 5% growth in the next 10 years for geoscientists. And that looks like almost 2,300 jobs per year focused on geosciences. And that doesn't sound like a ton, but that's actually quite a large amount for what we're doing. And then a larger statistic, sort of more broadly in Canada for geoscientists, there's roughly 10,000 job vacancies focused on geosciences in all the areas that I just mentioned available in Canada at this point, and still expecting growth there over the next several years. So if this is an area that has interest to you, or if you're looking at joining the job force in the Americas, this is obviously an area that we could use some support in from the geosciences sector. So moving a bit more into why does international experience matter? In my experience as a recruiter, mining is a global field, and by having the opportunity to work internationally, specifically as a geoscientist, it helps accelerate your career growth. It gives you experiences to say, I've worked on a project in Africa. I have worked on a project in Canada, and actually they're quite similar. And these are all the reasons why. Or having an understanding of some of the geopolitical factors, as Palesa had mentioned. It also really influences and shapes your leadership skills. So as you advance in your career, having the international opportunity to deal with multilingual, multicultural, areas where you've got emerging countries and mindset, this is something that insulates your career and your ability to lead and manage others from other locations as well. I also think that it really does make you a bit more competitive in the overall job market. And so when we have candidates who are isolated to a specific region, they tend to continue to work in that area because that's what they know. And there's room for specialists and generalists alike. But if you, as Palesa had suggested, if you're deliberate and you think about a career path as you move forward, I think it's, advantageous for many to broaden out that base in terms of their experience globally, so that they can have a bit more competitiveness in their applications for specific roles. So moving forward, talking a bit more about that global perspective, as I mentioned, mining companies operate, they could be headquartered in the US, but have an operation in Africa. They could be headquartered in Canada, but be operating or looking at projects in Mexico. And so having the opportunity to work as an expat, work on a fly-in, fly-out rotation, having worked as a consultant and visited all kinds of different locations, gives you that experience to work with really global oriented organizations. I think something that we also see quite often is that regardless of where a mining company may be headquartered, they acquire or merge with or do a joint venture with other organizations or groups worldwide. And so just because your company may be based in Canada with operating asset there, they may wind up with something elsewhere, and having had the experience of working in a more global sphere gives you continued edge on opportunities and adds value to the organization as you've had different experiences. I also think that the opportunity to understand international markets and cultures is highly valuable. As I've mentioned, as you advance in your career, when you have the opportunity to work with others from different parts, it aids in that skill set. You get to lead, you have the opportunity to say, hey, I understand, that you may have a very different work culture, and this is how I can support you as a leader or a manager and support your growth in our organization. Or really say, hey, we've got a JV, or we're looking at, doing some M&A work for a client, and I've worked there. So, let me put my hand up and participate in this because I actually have some experience in dealing with that. So, understanding markets and people from a more international perspective is always a plus. Really just going into the learning and living abroad, it does enhance your skill set. And so many people really, really enjoy it. And in my experience as a recruiter in the past 20 years, working with expats has been a great experience for me. One, they have really fun stories about the work that they've done. And sometimes things don't always go according to plan, but their ability to adapt and enjoy it and sign up for the next opportunity that puts them in an expat role. I see that over and over and over again. And so one of my favorite stories, when I first started, I had actually maintenance manager role in West Africa. And this individual had recently finished an opportunity and raised his hand, said, I'll do this. And I called after the first rotation. His house was in Salt Lake, and said, hey, I think his wife answered, and I asked to speak to the individual and just check on. And she said, well, he's actually not back. And, he went and wound up, getting malaria, and he's having a great time, and he wants to stay, through the second rotation because it's just such a great experience. And I said, okay. So I called back another 8 weeks later, and he was home and told me great stories and said, despite the fact that I got sick, I'm learning, and the people are wonderful, and I've already, made such a difference, and all these things. And it was about 5 years later, and he finished his rotation there, and he called me and he said, what do you got next? And I think I sent him to Mongolia at that point. So, these individuals tend to really, really love the expat lifestyle. And now he works for a company that I also represent, actually in Tennessee. And he's been such a great leader and manager for that group because he's lived and worked all over the place. And so I don't know that there's anything this man hasn't seen, but the receptiveness that from his crew that he works with, and just being really a very kind and open manager, individuals that are expats just seem to sign up for it over and over again. And if it's not for you, then it's not for you, and you've gotten the great experience of doing such. So moving forward, some general challenges, and there always will be some. In the US and Canada and Mexico, we have the NAFTA visa. So it's a TN1, and to get between any of those three countries tends to be quite easy as long as you have at least a bachelor's degree. To get to at least US and Canada from Australia is also relatively simple. Outside of those areas, things get a little bit more complex. And so working with a recruiter, understanding the places that you want to work, understanding some of the immigration rules are really, really important. But as a recruiter that works internationally, I maintain a list of attorneys ultimately that help with immigration and can walk candidates through a lot of those complexities. And often our clients are a bit smaller, and so they also need that support. And so I've found that really a quick 30-minute call gives you a lot more information. And if you're thinking about working as an expat or on a bit more global scale, taking a meeting with an immigration attorney that can walk you through some of that would be one of the first places I'd suggest you start. Again, the cultural and workplace adaptation sometimes takes time. You may never have done it before, and it could be a start of a great adventure. The same individual that I just mentioned, he wound up with malaria, and it happens. I think when I sent him to Mongolia, they had a giant windstorm and it blew part of the camp away. And so, sometimes these things happen, but it could be as simple as, adapting to a different kind of food or, internet challenges, all kinds of things. But, really, embracing that, creating an environment and people and a support system around you is part of the beauty of working internationally. And so being prepared and going in with eyes wide open, working with your recruiter, working with the organization to truly understand what that looks like, having the opportunity to visit ahead of time, all of those are really important. So outside of that, the lifestyle implications, as Palesa had mentioned, really thinking about how does this affect from healthcare, taxes, what about my family or spouse or children? Are there schools nearby? Like, what does that really look like? So asking informed questions in advance will really help to smooth some of those challenges out. So where do you start? As a professional considering international opportunities, I really think that these 4 areas specifically, networking and professional development, industry-specific job boards, utilizing specialized recruiters, and your digital presence are a great place to start. I talked quite a bit about resume, and so I can't emphasize enough that that's also part of this, but I'm not going to go into that too much today. So from a networking and professional development standpoint, I think attending international conferences, maintaining a presence, building that network around you is so critical. And so expanding your professional network, utilizing, professional development, going to these conferences, participating in webinars and things like this, those are all ways of continuing that, and that's a very active presence in the marketplace. Because when you do that, you hear about all different kinds of opportunities that might be of interest to you. At least here in the US and Canada, these are some areas for industry-specific job boards. So, beyond these borders, I think looking at regional geological societies and groups, universities, conferences who then sponsor jobs pages would all be great places just to kind of keep a read on what might be going on internationally for opportunities in geosciences. And then again, utilizing specialized recruiters in mining, in resources, and environmental, in any area that you might find yourself attracted to as a practice standpoint, so that they can say, hey, let's talk about your resume. Let's understand the regional requirements. Let's talk about your experiences at this point so that you can really stand out and highlight all of what you've got. And also so that they can say, hey, this is how we rank in terms of being competitive for options out there. But they may have a read on things that are not always posted through various job boards, et cetera. So recruiters are a great resource. I also think that maintaining a strong digital presence, and so LinkedIn, is one very easy way of doing this. And so outside of your resume, and your LinkedIn should be sort of an extension of that, but follow pages of companies that you're interested in, connect with individuals that work there, comment on their posts, having a presence and having a recognizable name that's associated with areas that you're working in or that you have interest in, gives them a frame of reference for you. And so I think that that's a really easy way of trying to kind of create that network a bit more from a bit more distance, I guess. And so also groups on LinkedIn, I think, are a really fabulous way of staying in touch with people internationally and continuing to maintain contact with your network. And then utilizing international keywords, specializing, your resume to opportunities. As Palesa said, language training, I think, is also really key. And so building that into both your digital presence and your resume are all additional ways of sort of enhancing that. So my suggestion is go international at least once. Take the opportunity. There's so much demand. There's huge growth opportunities for your career. I think that there's more than enough support coming out of all of the need for materials from a global standpoint. There are not enough professionals. We talk about this often. I'm sure Palesa does all the time as well. There are not enough individuals in geosciences, in the mining industry, et cetera, to go around. And so really carving out a purposeful trajectory of what you have interest in and how you can apply your skill sets is really, really important. And there's just so many practice areas, both in the Americas and beyond. So if you have questions, again, we'll be prepared to answer those at the very end. Thank you so much for listening to me today. You can obviously connect with me through LinkedIn or this lovely QR code. I'm always happy to answer questions, help with resumes, go over LinkedIn profiles, talk about various and sundry stories. So again, thank you so much for having me and listening for this today.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you very much for the first two presentations. The first two presentations, they were completely spiffy and really good. Now I've got to tell you what happens out there. On the screen here, you can see what it's like to be out in West Africa, typical sort of terrain, lateritic regolith. On the right-hand side, actually, you can see some nice manganese mountains, and they're in the far north of Mali, just north of Burkina Faso, in fact, areas you can't really go to now. Anyway, so this is what it's like actually when you're in these sorts of places. Now, as first two people were saying, it can get quite exciting out there in the bush. This is in very far western Mali, and you just got to be prepared for certain problems. In this particular case, my driver did not realize that the river had a big pothole, and so we drove straight into it, flooded the engine, and broke down. And we were hundreds of kilometers from anywhere, but luckily the little man in the barge could take us to safety. So I said, travel is a problem at times. Yes, it is a problem. This was last year sometime. I was in the Republic of Congo. By the way, actually, if I could reiterate some of the points that the ladies were making earlier, I can speak French. I'm English, so French is my second language, but I've concentrated a lot of work working in West Africa, Central Africa. So it really does help if you can speak a language. It opens a lot of doors. And back to this picture. Yeah, the journey was supposed to take us 6 hours to get from the base camp back to Brazzaville. It took us 13. And at the last 2 hours, basically, we had to sort of thumb a lift on the highway just to get back because the car, as you can see, broke down. And it doesn't help that there's no road. One of the problems you are going to find when you're out in the bush is that you actually have to get to where the rocks are. And that often means having to travel in very unforgiving environments across very unforgiving, in this case, rivers. But luckily, there's always locals there who can help you get across. And that's nice, yeah. However, I took this photograph when I was trying to get back to the airport in Sierra Leone. This is a funny thing you're going to find. When you land at Sierra Leone, to get to Freetown, you actually have to take a boat from the airport across the inlet, which takes about 45 minutes. And the planes to go back leave very, very early in the morning. So you have to leave even earlier. So yes, this was quite exciting. And when you're traveling between the two Congos, you have to go across the Congo River. And here you are. So that's a nice view of Kinshasa, and taken from where I am on the banks on Brazzaville. And I had to get across through town and then out to the airport so I could catch the midnight flight back to South Africa. These are all sorts of, how can I say, things you have to sort of reconcile with yourself, that life is not easy. And it really doesn't help stamping your little feet and getting angry or whatever, because it won't help. The best thing you can do is just go with the flow. And again, if you can speak the language, it does help. Now, communications. Everyone's got cell phones these days and whatever, and laptops. But really, when you're here, it's tricky. And as you can see, these gentlemen, at the party I was with, I was accompanying these gentlemen to try and find some alluvial gold deposits in the Republic of Congo. Yeah, they were trying to get signals so that they could sort of check in on X and WhatsApp. Yeah, it's not going to work. Now, the weather. The weather, yeah. The trouble is that you actually do have to be prepared to go into any environment at any time of year, because the client wants to start a program early, or he wants you to go and have a look at something, at a project, and give them an impression. Is it mineable? Is it economic? You know, all those sorts of things. So you can have a nice, bright sunshine, you know, and especially when you're up here on the Sudanese border, very nice and hot and very, very dry. However, if you're in Zimbabwe in the winter, it's really, really cold. And I had to spend a couple of nights in the bush looking at this. There's copper gold projects for a client who wanted to know, are they viable? So he said, well, there's a tent, off you go. And there it was. That was really, really cold, honestly. However, that was really, really wet. Yeah, I was in a village about 250 kilometers from Brazzaville, in the middle of basically a rainforest, and it lived up to its name. I would go there for 2 weeks, help the local people actually run a alluvial gold campaign in the forests, in the rivers. And in the evenings, I'd stay in my tent, or there was a little building there with, I don't call them toilets, because that would be very charitable to call them toilets. But anyway, you get the idea. When you're out there, it is difficult. It is hard. And realistically, nothing really prepares you for this. The only thing that does prepare you is having done it quite a number of times already. which I know isn't a great help, but that's what it's like. Now, working conditions. When your client says, listen, Chris, I know it's the rainy season, but I really need you to get into the field. Give me an idea about if we can bring the excavators in and start mining. So as you can see, what my answer probably was, based with all this, I'm a fairly tall person actually, and this grass is taller than me. So that was fun. This was in Katanga a few years ago. And this was underground in Zimbabwe. I do a lot of helping companies training in greenstone belts, especially greenstone gold. And so you spend a lot of time either in open pits or in underground. And so this is, it's teaching the local geologists how to look at structures, how to look at mineralization. And you've got these jackhammers roaring away. People are busy because they want to, get you out so that they can charge up the blast holes. So you have to understand it's quite variable. This was in Cameroon when I was helping out with a London client looking for bauxite in the northern regions of Cameroon. Very interesting, lovely place. Found lots of bauxite there. Again, French speaking, and so again, it was a boon. And yes, I think you're getting the idea actually that the idea of being in these places. This is in the central province on the equator in Cameroon. It's a jungle, as you can see, and it's a whole series of rivers systems which contain rutile in the sands. And I was there for quite a number of years helping to evaluate these deposits. But the idea, of course, is how do you evaluate it? How do you do this sort of work in these sorts of conditions? It really taxes you. I'd say be prepared. Sometimes things come up and you go, I've never seen this before. This is an open pit in the Kolwezi area, and it had basically been dug almost entirely by artisanals. And they've picked out the eyes of the ore body, as you can see, and they're packing all the copper, cobalt into those sacks, and then they walk up out of the pit and dump it at the top. So this is mining at its most basic and its most dangerous. So when you hear news about mine collapses, improper working practices, slave labor, whatever, imagine this. And yes, one of the things about working in West Africa is it's the great time around Tabaski. But then the roads tend to get sort of choked with all the sheep. So be prepared. Now, that's me when it's very, very hot on the left-hand side. And so on the right-hand side, it's very, very wet. It's hard and tough, especially when you're out there for a long time. And there you are in a bit of a jungle, but you make a lot of good friends and you help people, you learn from them, they learn a lot from you. And it's been a good time. It's been good. Africa is a beautiful continent. It really is. I've been privileged to see incredible sights throughout. my time, and hopefully to keep on going out there. That's the lights over Kampala in the evening time. But if anything, be careful. It is unexpected. Things will happen, and they'll happen fast. On the left, the local lobby stepped in to resolve some discussions with artisanal miners. That was interesting for a while. And on the right, I was in hiking my way up through Uganda, and this elephant came onto the road. Yeah, be careful. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is it.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Thanks all, and thanks for inviting me. I am going to try my best to keep this to 5 minutes, but there's a lot to chat about. So essentially, I'm Sarah Turnbull. I have done the vast amount of my work has been within Southern Africa, basically from the Congo down. That's where it's been concentrated. I've done a bit of work in West Africa, but really it's concentrated in Southern Africa. And I've been working now as a geologist, as a greenfield exploration geologist for 14 years. So I studied geology completely by mistake. I chose it I did a general BSc, I did maths, physics, and chemistry, and it just went, and I chose geology. I just needed a fourth subject. Then I realized I really, really loved it, and changed my major altogether. And I really feel that often it's downplayed and people don't know enough about it, but obviously all of you guys do. That's why you've joined this. And really what I think that we do, or at least what I've had and the opportunities that I've had, is I've really just had a lot of fun in the field. Challenges, but lots of fun. So what I've found that with my career as an exploration geologist is that I've, let me get a laser pointer. I've spent 6 years in this tent over here. This was my home for 6 years, and I worked as an expat in Mozambique. And just to reiterate, I can speak very basic Portuguese, and without that, it's more instructive. But without that, I don't think that I would have gotten very far in my career without it. We are often the first on the ground. This was me within a dozer. I got an opportunity to use it a little bit with the dozer operator teaching me. But we basically made the roads into the area. We went and cleared pads. We went and created space to go and set up our camp. And before that, we went to go and sort of meet with the villagers and play with hula hoops and talk and do all sorts of things. Also, just like Chris's experience, this was over the mighty Limpopo that we had to get over it to get to our diamond site. And so there's been really quite a lot of challenging times that I've spent, and it really requires a number of different skills for you to get your work done. So it's not purely just your technical skills, neither just your soft skills, but also a lot of additional survival skills, I suppose, and things like having to cook your meals, having to wash your clothes at times, having to know how to get your car out of a very muddy, difficult situation, know how to drive your 4x4. And down here, this was my soft skill in that we needed to, the client was in the DRC, and he had just built his karaoke bar, which he was very, very proud of, and requested me to go and sing Backstreet Boys. So here's my colleague Vota and I singing Backstreet Boys. And so there's really a number of different skills that we had to keep hold of. But really as an exploration geologist, getting back to the more technical part, we really need to understand the economics of a deposit, and we're sort of put there as the first boots on the ground to go and find out. And so it's really dependent on geology, geochem, and geophysics, and using these skills together. But it's not just that alone. It's using a number of other sciences like remote sensing, mining and metallurgy, mineralogy, ESG. That's really important with a lot of the work that I've done. There's a lot of artisanals within the area, and ESG has played a huge role. The finances of the whole thing, and whether you can actually get it to a mine stage, And then now what's really come and has become a big part of the work that we're doing is machine learning and innovation and all this R&D work that's going into it. So to find that deposit and to develop that deposit, there's really a number of skills. And so I'd like to say that as geologists, we're a jack of all trades, but a master of none. But oftentimes it's better than a master of one. I really feel that talking about my experience is much like Chris's, is I've had a lot of adventures, and one of the ones that I wanted to share with you, or one of the sides of it is really meals that I've had. So while I was in Tanzania recently, I had these were the only things that I could order, and so I went just for some chicken nuggets. I thought that was possibly the safest on the list, and I thought, okay, with those options, let me try. And this is what showed up in the middle of Tanzania, was this sort of soup and chicken pieces and carrots. And so actually, when I started mixing up my soup, there was lots of little feathers that went bloop, 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 bloop. And these are also some interesting meals that I've had recently. Goat curry in Zambia, that's very common. I've eaten a lot of goats. And along with that karaoke evening, I was also treated to 100-year-old eggs in the middle of the DRC. So I had some pretty strange eating experiences. But what's fascinating is this actually hasn't been my worst. I was given the opportunity to have some sea cucumber, and so in Mozambique, our local translators, as a delicacy and as a thank you to me for having worked with them, he spoke Makua, and so to speak to the local area and the artisanals, he decided to bring in some sea cucumbers and made the sea cucumber broth. And when I tried to dish up in my bowl and I tried to just take the broth, he was clearly watching and said, no, you need more meat, it's delicious. And I used to be a really picky eater, but in these experiences, you just go with the flow, and I've eaten all sorts of strange, and I'm not sure wonderful, but strange things. Really just trying to keep in with that 5 minutes, because I'm basically here. Expat life with a junior, or this has been my experience as a junior with as an expat. You get very competitive compensation. When I did my work, I didn't have to pay tax, so that was really nice, considering how the tax laws worked. That was what the negotiation was between South Africa and Mozambique, and so I paid a very small amount of tax, so that was a huge benefit to me doing expat work. I had fantastic experience. I got to see amazing things, or I still do. I get to see amazing things, and I think one of my biggest benefits is I've got to work with so many different people with multidisciplinary skill sets. And sometimes it goes from professors and doctors and people with a huge amount of knowledge and academic knowledge and experience. But just as much as I've worked with locals in the area that have had very basic educations, but they're actually possibly some of the best geologists that I've ever met or worked with, because they, for the hand in mouth, they're working with this and they know exactly what rocks to look for, and physically they touch it and feel it and work with it every day. It's very dangerous, but I've learned so much with them. My next point is that it's dangerous and physically demanding, and we work outdoors, you work long hours. It's really tough. But I've had malaria. I've sort of been reined in where we couldn't travel anywhere, and the water was rising, and we had our tents, but we were sort of limited to this area, and we couldn't get food in. I've had bilharzia. For my birthday, our truck driver bought me cashew nuts, but they hadn't been cooked, and there was a specific chemical within cashew nuts, which I didn't know, that reacted very, very badly to me. And I then had to be rushed to a clinic, which is also very basic. And I think that's the other point, is that we're working often in area or in an environment with a lot of yellow machinery where things can go wrong, and we don't have access to great medical facilities. And even getting to a hospital can take up to 3, 4, 5 hours, as Chris said. You have a basic clinic, but if something's gone wrong, it's dangerous. I have always had constant company. I'm always with people and I'm always working with people, but sometimes it can be really isolating because the people that you're working with are not necessarily the people that you would automatically choose to spend your time with. And it's fine for a while, but when you eat and sleep and work and travel with these people, you actually miss your people as well. So while you always have company, it's very difficult. And I think the other part that we don't always acknowledge when you're working away is that it puts a huge strain on relationships. You're working away, you are living your job. I think once you get expats work in your blood, you love it and you have this passion for it. But there's a whole nother life that's happening back at home, and it's really difficult to balance that. And the other difficult part is coming back from the field, going into sort of a more city life. Your experiences are not the same as everybody else's within the within a city. So it's really difficult to sometimes find a common ground because you're battling with very different challenges to the people in town. But yeah, that's really it, and that's a very, very quick broad overview.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm Ian Gendel, and I'm CEO and president of a junior exploration company in Canada. I'm based in Vancouver, and I started my career as an exploration geologist with an MSc from Rhodes University. I joined a company called Gencor way back in the 90s, and at that time, I just wanted to mention that I just came out of military training, was looking for a job, went to various mining groups looking for a job as an exploration geologist. And as you know, most companies, most majors at that time were employing you on the mines. And one of the few companies that offered me a job in exploration was Gencor. So I took that job, worked as an exploration geologist in the Witwatersrand, doing deep drilling in the East Rand for them from about 89 to 94. And then in 94, they moved me to Mendoza in Argentina. Myself and another mate, we moved to open up an office in Mendoza, and we moved across. I had just got married in 93. I moved across with my wife on the 14th of February 94 to Mendoza with 7 metal trunks, trommels as we call them, and 2 bicycles, and that was pretty much it. We settled in Mendoza in a 1-bedroom apartment at that time, and I was doing exploration in the northern part of Argentina on a property called the Taka Porphyry Copper Project, which was drilled by Gencor. We were the first to drill that porphyry copper project, which is currently with First Quantum. Moving across, I think, is to a new country where you don't speak the language is very difficult. We hadn't had any Spanish introduction while I was in South Africa, so it was pretty much hit the ground, tried to learn Spanish and tried to do the job to the north of where we were settled. I think it's also important to note that, you know, it's the partner that you're with. There's a big sacrifice that's to be made, particularly if you move as an expat to another country. In this case, my wife was a pharmacist. She had worked for 7 years in South Africa as a pharmacist. Moving to a country where you don't speak the language is very difficult. And essentially at that time, she was in the same position as me, trying to find a way of learning the culture, understanding the difficulties that we were coping with at that time, not being able to speak the language, and also not being able to work as a pharmacist, which was probably more difficult for her than myself, because I spent my time in this place that you see on this slide in the northern part of Argentina. So We this is the one-bedroom apartment we were staying in. As I mentioned, you know, we buying things at that time. As soon as you enter a new country, you don't speak the language, is tough. Finding, you don't find supermarkets as we knew it at that time. It was just the local markets where you go to and buy your food, which was interesting. But having said that, it was a great experience, and we enjoyed it very much in terms of the experience we had. This was the Tola Grande, where we worked with on the Taka Taka project. Altitude is we're high up in the Andes. That's 3,500 plus meters. What I remember really in terms of being there at that time was amazing. The camel rally, which some of you may or may not know, was from the 80s to the 2000s, I think. It was a rally that went through various parts of the world, and at this time the camel rally went through Argentina, Paraguay, and Chile. And we so happened to be staying in the Tola Grande village. That's my wife behind there, and this is the team that I was with. They came through the village, and this is the first time I saw the new South African flag, as we had just had elections in I think that was April of '94. So those experiences you'll never forget. From that, we moved north to Ecuador. We lived in Quito. We had a big project. Genco had a big project at that time in the southern part of Ecuador, and we made some very big discoveries in the Jurassic belt of southeast Ecuador, where we found the porphyry copper deposits, which are currently being mined. The experience we had there was the same. I think your partner has to be pretty flexible as to what you do and where you go to, and you have to be appreciative of that as well. As mentioned earlier, you know, transport is in various forms. In this case, it's on mules, donkeys, walking. Our camps were very primitive, as we all have been working in remote areas. This is my wife at the bottom. She actually came through on many occasions and stayed in camp with us. We spent Christmas of '96 in camp with the geophysicists, the geophysical crew that we see here. And, getting in and out of places. They were stopped by mules, by helicopters. Working in areas is difficult. Camping most times, as you know, and living in 1-star, if it's that, hotel that they call it, which is Hotel of the East in that slide. So moving forward quickly, we moved from there to Lima in Peru in 2000 and 2005. My sons were born, I have two boys. One was born in Ecuador and one was born in Peru. Managing family lifestyle and work in remote areas is not easy, and you have to work very hard to ensure that you balance your lifestyle. This is a view of my two boys and the area we lived in Lima and Peru. Great experiences. I think they'll never forget this. And learning a new language, which I can speak fluently now, has been great for my continued work in South America. And I do encourage that you embrace the language, embrace the culture, enjoy the times that you're working in areas that many people will never see in their lifestyle, and probably pay a huge amount of money to visit those areas. Anyway, from Peru, we moved to Canada in 2005. I joined a junior exploration company. I ran various junior exploration companies during my time from 2005 to now, and I'm currently back working in Peru, where we have a porphyry copper moly project, an advanced project there, and experiencing pretty much what I did in my early career. As I said, having that experience and being able to speak the language is so important. And I think I encourage people to embrace the language, embrace the culture, and really consider your partner and consider the profession that your partner has taken, and how your partner can adapt to your experiences with you as you move internationally. I think that's pretty much it.
Everybody, Chris and Sarah and Ian, you've done an amazing job of talking about all the adventures that we have overseas, and especially when we start at a younger age, like Ian and I, it can be pretty exciting. It is all hands on deck when you are in the field. So I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I'm an exploration geologist. I've been in the business for more than 35 years. I left Canada after my undergraduate and after I'd had a couple of years working in Northern Ontario. And during my undergraduate, I was very fortunate to have worked all across Canada for the different geological surveys of Canada, which had almost the same conditions as some of Chris's photographs of being rough and in the field. And, there was never a toilet back in those days. And it was very, very isolating, and no signals, and, radio contact with the base in Yellowknife. So the whole point of that was it was exciting, but it wasn't enough. And in Canada, we experienced an incredible downturn in the exploration industry in the early 90s. And a lot of Canadian geologists, went overseas, specifically to Latin America. And it was an incredibly exciting time because there was a lot of money flowing into the Americas at that time, huge amounts of money for places like Venezuela, Guyana, Venezuela, I mean, all of them, Peru, Argentina. And my husband and I, who was my boyfriend at the time, and also an exploration geologist, got work in Venezuela, and southern part of Venezuela, that's very famous for artisanal gold mining. At the time, there were a couple of gold producers. One was Monarch, and another one was I'm not remembering right now. But anyway, the long and short of it was, I left in 1995, and I got to spend 15 years of my exploration geology career overseas. And it started here in Venezuela, and it was one of those things, as the others were saying, once it's in your blood, it's very hard to let go. And this is my very first field crew in Venezuela, and it was very unlike working conditions in Canada, because in Canada it was you either solo traversing or you and a field assistant splitting core, and there was no such thing as an abundance of people who were incredibly good-natured, hardworking, and knew a lot about the lay of the land. So I was running an RC program. I'd never drilled an RC with RC rigs, because in Canada, typically at the time, it was diamond drilling. So this is us in Venezuela drilling off the Tomita project, and the terrain is incredible and phenomenal. I spent 3 years there, and at the end of those 3 years, we got work in Cuba. And when my husband and I started working together, it was just when the industry was turning around and hiring husband and wife teams, recognizing that if they had a husband and wife team on the ground, they wouldn't have to fly one of the two people home back to wherever it was. And in the 90s, it was 2 months away, 2 weeks home. So we were very successful, I'll say, in having worked together. I worked for one company in this instance. He worked for another company. And then from there, we went to Cuba, and we worked for 3 years in Cuba from 97 to 99 on a silver laterite project. And Cuba was an incredible experience and adventure, because working in a communist country that was tropical was very, very far removed from what it was like to live in Venezuela. Living in Venezuela, you were always incredibly careful. You were always, you lived behind bars, and you didn't go out at night. And living in Cuba, which was an island where pretty much a police state, we were a lot safer. So we spent 3 years working there. And the thing about a small island, a big island, but being a small amount of expats, is that you are, big fish in a little pond. So the only picture I could find of Cuba is the next slide. And it's, it's my big claim to fame and my history of working overseas. But anyway, so that's a picture, guys. Maybe at the end we'll figure it out when the presentation is over. The whole point of that is it's exciting. It can be exciting being an expat in a small community. And what I would recommend, if you find yourself in those kind of situations, if you're a South African, a Canadian, it doesn't hurt to go to your country's embassy and let them know you're there and you're working, especially if you're working in a remote and dangerous place, just in case, right? They might be able to help you. Oh, there it is. Thank you. That's a much younger version of myself. Thanks, Mark. And then from Cuba, we went to Ecuador, and it looks like Ian and I worked in the same kind of place. We spent a couple of years working on a project in the Zamora area, which has now become a very big mine called Fruta del Norte, that the Lundin people know. And that too was something I had never experienced before, working in a tropical jungle that had an incredible amount of saprolite that was that remote. That would be slide number 3, Ian. And yeah. And and Ecuador was one of my favorite. Well, they were all my favorite, but Ecuador was great because it turned out to be a very, very big discovery. When we got into the camp, it was pretty rough. And we lived on platforms. I'd never seen so many snakes in my entire life during one work session. We had a South African working on the team, and he was in the field, and he had put up a poster in the office describing the 2 kinds of snakes, or 2 kinds of venoms that snakes had, which was very new to me. And one was the venom, and I'm not remembering the technical terms, where if it got to you, it just went to your central nervous system and you'd be okay. You just had to lie down. And if they had the antivenom, you'd be okay. But then the other snake that could get you was the one that the poison went straight to your brain, and you would be dead in 40 minutes. So you might as well just lie down and relax also. So slide number 3 is Ian or is it Mark is the Ecuador slides. And this is me in a creek bed coming down from sampling the trench on the left with like 5 samples in my back. On the left-hand side, you've got the discovery team for the Fruta del Norte project, Steve Leary in the center, and the Ecuadorian geologists, and my husband and I on the far left. And then what was incredible about this camp was the density of the forest, and to get to a drill target required, first of all, clearing. And then you had to put a corduroy road in, and then the drills were man-portable. And I had never experienced, man-portable rigs in my whole entire life. And if you look at how hard these people worked, and the gear that they didn't have, and their willingness to do such a terrible job, it always just impressed me. And then my last big job, after this job, we went overseas, and we worked in Botswana, which I have to say was one of my highlights, because there is nothing like that. All I saw of Africa was the Sub-Sahara, and I couldn't believe how incredibly beautiful it was. We worked in a bush camp in Botswana around Francistown, and again, incredibly marvelous people, highly skilled, and fortunately, we all spoke English. Yeah, and the same kind of adventures, building camps in the middle of on the edge of the Kalahari Desert, and the community and the camaraderie with the people that we got to know was quite phenomenal. And I was saying we were there almost 3 years, and if we had tipped the 3-year scale, we probably would have stayed in that part of Africa for a very long time. And the only reason you come home is because of family. And after 15 years overseas, it just felt like it was the right time to come home. My mother was 83 at the time, and I missed having old friends and being there for my friends that were, some were getting divorced and some were losing their parents. So it just kind of felt like the right thing to do. So, but if we ever get another chance, I think I'd love to show you guys some pictures of Canada, because working in Canada, where I've been working for the last 15 years, is the extreme opposite of these beautiful and incredible tropical countries, but not without its merit also.
Lindsey and Palesa, do your recruitment agencies only place people in your respective home countries, or do you help candidates with differing nationalities?
I think I can answer this. Well, in terms of my recruitment firm, we deal with a global talent pool because our clients are global. So we accept and help candidates from all nationalities.
Great. And Lindsey?
Same goes. Probably about 80% of our work happens to fall within Canada, US, and Latin America, but we do accept international talent from anywhere as our clients demand that at times. And then we represent clients from other places, as I said, about 20% of the rest of the time.
Great. And I encourage those that are participating and listening in to reach out to Lindsey and Palesa as a great starting point if you want to reignite your international geoscience work experience, or if you're new to it. They'd probably love to hear from you to expand, again, their client base and pool of talent that they can help fill needs from. Next question for, again, Palesa and Lindsey. I'll give you a short list of the obvious items, but can you again give a list of the things I don't mention that of the hiring criteria recruiters consider regarding the various global regions, working in Africa, Europe, and America? There's obviously people's international work experience, their technical skill sets, obviously their personality and soft skills, language skills, and of course their flexibility and accommodating work schedule. Are there other things that you can think of that are important when you're trying to place candidates with some of your clients for their hiring needs?
I'm happy to jump in there. I think that understanding the team dynamic and culture of any client that we're representing is part of a selection criteria for potential candidates. So that's not always soft skills, but it winds up being our ability to assess from a holistic perspective what a candidate brings to the table, what their leadership skills are, where they've worked, their background, their education, and how they might come into the fold with the rest of the team. And so I think, all of it comes into play, but there's not always just a short list of things that we're looking at. I think that our job is to take into consideration a variety of factors, and the candidate's ability to convey those appropriately is probably one of the most important parts of what we have to do and assess. So I think as a candidate to prepare, that ultimately sending a quick cover letter, a note, following up on your resume or your LinkedIn inquiry to something that we've got, that is part of your ability to convey your readiness to pursue something at this level in any jurisdiction. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. Plus, anything to add, or did Lindsey kind of cover it?
Yeah, Lindsey did cover it, but yeah, just to add on that, it's essentially about your culture fit. So other than just looking at sort of the technical skill sets, the soft skill sets, we analyze as recruiters and the future employers how you can fit within the organization. And when we say culture fit, we don't mean sort of your ethnicity and background. We mean how you can assemble within the team and really be a value add within the talent scope.
Great, thank you. And then
sorry,
Go
Mark.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's Chris. I just wanted to add something to what the ladies were saying. I have found, obviously, in my career that as soon as you can, you should aim to get as much experience in the various aspects of geology. You can't just be a geologist. You have to have a very good understanding of statistics. You have to have a very good understanding of resource estimation. You have to understand the principles of chemistry. When you go into the field, the people who are wanting you to go into the field don't want necessarily a geologist. They want someone who's got a full skill set. So if you can learn about, mine planning, learn about and go on courses in a cash flow analysis and DCF and NPV type calculations, because you can offer people so much more.
I think as Sarah kind of covered it, kind of being, again, having a really broad skill set, but not really being a master at any one, kind of being able to talk a lot of technical different languages in terms of skills.
And I think, sorry, just to interrupt, I think what's also really powerful is to have a network as well, so that if you don't know a certain skill or that's not your area of expertise, you know who you can trust and who you can ask to be guided, so that you can make that technical decision based on their expertise.
Thank you, Sarah. And then Lindsey and Palesa, are there any sort of general upper age restrictions for geoscientists getting visas to work overseas? Somebody gave an example. Are there hiring demands for middle-aged geologists overseas and internationally? And have you had to deal with countries that have work visa age restrictions of, say, 55 years old, or other age restrictions for those that have quite a bit of experience? Maybe they worked overseas in a younger part of their career and might want to go back to that. Do you find a demand with people that are kind of more towards the later portion of their career? Thoughts on that?
In
From my side,
Go ahead.
sorry, Lindsey.
That's okay. Go ahead, Palesa.
From my side, it's really dependent on our clients and what they're looking for. Sometimes you find that some clients want a more mature candidate who has, seen everything and has more breadth across their experience and can adapt. Or sometimes you find that clients want a more junior profile. So for that, I would say it's really dependent on what our clients are looking for. Yeah.
I absolutely agree, and I'm in concert with that. I think to answer the question, I think that I'm hearing, which is, are there restrictions on visas for age? Certain locations will have restrictions on age. We work in Saudi Arabia often, they have a restriction at 55 or 60 to allow other people to work there. And so it's not client driven, not company client driven. It's actually driven by the consulate and what they'll allow visas for. So there are others in different countries. I do not know all of them off the top of my head, but you can very quickly Google and or counsel with an immigration attorney that can answer some of those questions more specifically. Saudi Arabia has some more of the strict ones out there in my experience, but US, Canada, less so on age restrictions.
Great, thank you. And then sort of for everyone, not just the recruiters, has anyone had experiences where the hiring company, the employee, has supported geoscientists with perhaps their graduate programs where they might want to do a master's on the project they're working on, or they might want to find a project to support a graduate program? Have companies supported those things internationally?
I can answer from the Canadian perspective, but if you have work here, if you are working here, we will support graduate students. So I would suggest that there's two ways of entering. Either you come in and do a graduate program. Somebody's looking for students, and we're definitely looking for students to do, I know they are research projects, so you come in that way, or you come in by a company and then you find a professor that will take on a project that the company needs addressed. So two ways, two entryways.
Thanks, Danielle. Any others? Okay, for Chris, with that picture you shared of the artisanal mining situation there, are there forms of aid or assistance or awareness for the miners in those really difficult conditions? And have you found your employers performing any sort of outreach related to those situations?
I think actually that particular situation, the enormity of it, what you were saying. I was visiting that particular mine with my client. He was interested in certain properties and whatever. He had no influence over what was going on. In the Congo, there is an artisanal collective called Comicat, and they are the people who actually who represent the workers' interests. The government itself actually sets aside various licenses and permits for artisanal workers themselves. They have rights, and they are protected at their ground. But also these people are incredibly poor. And it would be very difficult to find a situation where people would not do work because they felt unsafe or whatever, because they say, I've got no option. I must look after my family. This is what I must do. And I've seen similar things in West Africa, the Kenya, and Mali and Ethiopia, where crushing poverty means that people have to do these sorts of things.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the case in my experience as well. For everybody, all the presenters, does anyone know of a sort of a managed list of countries that either the recruiters that you don't hire for and that we would want to check to see if we would even want to pursue an opportunity working in?
I could talk to that. So as a consultant, we travel to a number of different, we would travel to where our clients would ask us for the projects to attend the projects. So we use the FDCO, the website FDCO, and essentially it's got 3 different outlooks on an area. Green is an area you can travel to. Yellow is pretty dangerous, you can travel, but travel with caution. And then red is basically my insurance is based in the UK, and they wouldn't then insure us to go to these areas. And for instance, I know that there's quite a large part in Mali that's the case. The DRC around Goma, that is the case. So yeah, that's what I'd recommend, is looking at the FDCO. And the other one is Crisis 24. They also give basically a map on the areas, and give a very similar output on the different areas. And then you can you would give those locations to your insurances and ask them whether they would cover you for that travel.
Yeah. And I know the U.S. government maintains a public list of countries more for tourism, of places to go, not to go, that kind of thing. So that would be a place, I think, for any country, your home passport, wherever you're from, they probably maintain a list, because of their own relations with different countries around the globe could differ from a different country. So that would be a place to start, with your home country's website and asking there. Security being obviously a big concern. So Sarah, this came from your presentation, so maybe you can start, but others can join in. What has been the various sort of insurance coverage? You touched on this just a minute ago. Insurance coverages, benefits offered, and compensation offerings working in areas and regions of higher risk as an exploration geologist.
Sure. No, that's really tough. And I think that would have to be a negotiation that you'd have to do with the client or the potential employer yourself. That's something that I wouldn't be able to go and give advice to. So the best thing that I would do is find out about the insurances. I have personally never had danger pay, so I can't speak to danger pay. And I suppose the best advice would be go to find people within that area, working within that specific area, within companies, and see if they're willing to share to share how much they would be paid to work in these areas. But I think the other problem comes in is that different companies have very different risk profiles. So you need to make sure that as the employee or the person that's the consultant, if that company's risk profile sort of sits well with you, because there's some pretty dangerous places, and it would depend. Money isn't always the best, or isn't always the only motivating factor. And I think it would be really important to understand what the evacuation plans would be, what their security protocol is, what their general intelligence is on the area. Working in Mozambique, we had people break into our mine, and unfortunately they killed one of our staff that worked there, and that happened at 2:30 in the morning. And I only found out about it at 3 when I was woken up half an hour later. But at 2:45, before I was even woken up, I had people in Maputo sending me messages to let me know that had happened. So the Bush Telegraph is pretty strong, and they had really good insight into that and intel. So it really is a very personal decision.
Yeah, and it can really vary, I think. And to sum it up, the company will give you a lot of research that they have, but I think we'd all recommend that you do your own research as diligently and definitely as possible, to kind of know what you're getting yourself into, regardless of what the company's offering. Anyone else have other ideas to share about sort of the various packages that they've had to kind of work through in different opportunities? All right, and then we had another question just around, I don't know, I think this was Ian, your presentation when you with your spouse. Is that something that's really rare, or is it more common? And what are the type of experiences where spouses can accompany the geoscientists on projects?
You're on mute.
Ian, are you still there?
He's on mute.
Okay, sorry.
No problem.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry guys. Yeah, just I think those were the 90s, and my wife didn't spend all the time on the project. We were based in Mendoza or Quito at that time. So, but she did come to the project, maybe for a week or two, And, as I said, at times over Christmas, we were still working, and, it was accepted at that time to do so. I think it's may have changed a little bit now in terms of the bigger companies. Junior companies may make accommodations for that. So the protocols are probably a little different now as they, compared to the 90s or the 80s. But that is still possible, and more developed camps and more security in different places that would be allowed. And I think it just depends on the companies.
Yeah,
I do want to make mention regarding security, and I always call it common sense. There was an incident when I was working in northern part of Ecuador, close to the Colombian border, and the company was looking at some projects in Colombia, and because I was so close to the border, I'd get that bush telegraph as mentioned by Sarah in terms of what's happening, and the terrorist groups on the other side were coming across. And when the company asked me to go to look at that project, I said, well, at that time I still had a bit of hair and it was red. And I said, well, that's not going to work, because the moment I cross the border, I'm going to be a target. So, you make use of your intel while you're in these areas, and to make those decisions. And having said that, there was someone that was taken on the other side by the terrorist group, and obviously, the company had to pay to get them out. So these instances, it's part of intel, it's part of working with the company you're in as to the security of it all. But obviously, that is important, working in remote areas and difficult areas wherever you are in the world.
Thanks, Ian. That's the end of the questions that I had seen in the chat. There's another one here. Do geoscientists with disabilities have lesser chances to work with those international companies? I think in general, that would really depend on the disability and the nature of the opportunities that they're out there internationally. Does anyone else have anything else to contribute, or experiences of working with folks? I guess, again, it really depends on the disability. But any other thoughts or comments? Okay, I'll turn it over to Nolene for closing comments. We do have an ending poll here that I think Nolene just put up, and we're just trying to get a little bit of an idea of where folks that participated in the webinar are from, so we can sort of see a little bit of the geographical distribution of our attendees and the companies folks work for. Nolene, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Mark. I'd like to start by thanking our speakers again for giving up your time and sharing your expertise. We've truly enjoyed it.